Welcome to the inaugural speaker, the expert speaker, and to all the participants who have joined in. There are participants on Zoom. There are also participants on YouTube who have joined in because this is being streamed on YouTube. So participants have joined at both the places. This four-part series that we have kept came about when I spoke to Satish and then I spoke to Anil, and we will see one or two more expert speakers join in the next 2 or 3 days. So we'll have 3 or 4 speakers enlightening us about forensic accounting and investigation standards, which were released by ICAI on 1st February 2021. Now, they were released by the Digital Accounting and Assurance Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And we thought that let us have somebody who's been on the committee who can enlighten us and make us aware of the standards, because somebody speaking to us, we understand the subject much better than only reading the subject, because you get a perspective which is different. So I think that's how we kept this 4-part series under the aegis of Sama Audit Systems and Softwares Private Limited. Now, I'll just go through 3 or 4 slides on why, according to us, these standards are necessary, of course, and then, of course, move on to the inaugural speaker, Anil Bhandari, and then to the expert, Satish Shenoy. But what we felt at Sama, why they are important is, first is that there is an incidence of fraud is increasing every day. We know that, know that from the newspapers, we know that as professionals. There is a significant impact on stakeholders, and regulators are increasing the level of regulation as we find more frauds. As more frauds are highlighted in the newspapers, in the business world, the regulators are increasing the level of regulation. We have the Companies Act. I'll go through very quickly. We have the Companies Act 2013, which requires that the statutory auditors are to report to the central government if there is fraud or suspected fraud committed against the company. Primary responsibility, of course, is the governance of the entity and the management. We have CARO 2020 with respect to fraud, where an auditor needs to report whether any fraud has been noticed during the year. If yes, the nature and the amount. In case of receipt of whistleblower complaints, how have they been dealt by? So that has to be reported by the statutory auditor. You have the SEBI, which has come out that if a company initiates a forensic audit, of course, public listed companies, then that has to be reported to SEBI. And of course, now you have the forensic accounting and investigation standards, which are, I think, necessary in the current environment. Basically, because if any professional is looking at fraud or doing any accounting or investigation with respect to fraud, then there has to be a framework or guidelines under which a professional can work and do the job in a very professional manner. So, and also it stands the legal scrutiny in a court of law. So to have that, the institute has rightly come out with the standards. And I think this is the first such instance by a professional body across the world. There may be a few standards or frameworks or principles which are there across the world, but in a structured fashion, as a professional body, as a professional CPA or CA body, this is the first of its kind endeavor by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. So let us learn from Anil Bhandari and Satish Shenoy and other speakers in these 4 days. Let us go through, let us dive deep into the standards and take it forward. Now, I would introduce Anil Bhandari formally to you. So I think our first speaker today is the inaugural speaker, and he has kindly consented at a very short notice to come in. So many thanks to him. And I'll formally introduce Anil Bhandari to all of you. He's a dreamer, futurist, technologist, and an inspired innovator. He's a chartered accountant and more than 2 decades of experience in risk advisory and governance. He's an elected member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and has been a member and chairman of various standing and non-standing committees. He has notably worked for digital transformation at ICAI in the last 5 years of his stint at the council. He has been the president of Institute of Internal Auditors India, and he has served on several committees of IAI in India and internationally. He has been the chairman of WIRC, Western India Regional Council of ICAI, and is an active member of the ISACA India Task Force. He's been recently elected as the vice chairman of the Edinburgh Group, where he works for the SMPs across the world. Now, Edinburgh Group is a group of more than 20 accounting bodies across the world and works very closely with ICAI. He's an early investor in high growth technology companies. So he's got an eye for, uh, identifying the unicorns, and an enthusiast in cybersecurity, and in his free time reads Internet of Things. So I think with this, a very warm welcome to Anil. And Anil, over to you.
Thank you, Deepji. Thank you so much.
Anil, sorry to interrupt. Anil, sorry to interrupt. Deepji, can you stop your screen share?
I'm doing that.
Sorry, Anil, you can please go ahead.
No worries, no worries. So thank you, Deepji, for inviting me here on this platform. Satish, my good old friend, and Deepji, we've also go a long way, especially in the internal audit domain. So once again, it's my pleasure to be here on this platform, sharing my thoughts on fraud, forensic, something to do with governance, internal audit, and so on and so forth. I think this is a very timely topic that you've kept on this platform, because I was with Satish on one of the discussion points around fraud and forensic, and I do have a view on that, which I'll share with you very, very quickly. But before I go there, I'll probably try and take a couple of minutes to try and impress upon you what is likely to come true in terms of business models in the near future, which will then impress upon the fact on all of you that where are we going with these fraud and forensics, A, standards, B, also in future, what is it that we should look at and what we would look at. I think there is a fundamental shift in the business models that we see emerging in the world. And of course, all of us are aware in the last 10 years, technology has played a pivotal role in trying to transform business processes, simple processes, societal processes, and as you may like to call it, our daily lives as well. There has been so to say, a fantastic impact, and which is also troubling sometimes, but a fundamental shift which is happening, and this is happening very, very quickly. I mean, I remember that we've passed through this journey of technology, tools, and controls, but what we have seen in the last 5 years is just probably 10 or 20 times more than what we would have seen in the last 40 years. And every year that you gradually see the change coming is likely to be very, very fast and scalable to an nth extent. Business models that I would like to bring to your notice, one which is evolving across the world, one is the outcome-based business model. So I'm not sure, if I would have shared that with you before, Satish and Deepji, but and I'm sure you would be aware about it. It's not that it's something new, but outcome-based business models are becoming very, very important and very effective. What people are trying to look at is, it's no longer a car is what they want to buy. It's no longer a good-looking car. It's no longer a car really running fast. What they are looking forward to buy is a car which has got interaction, a car which is able to create experience for you, and a car which is eventually able to also be light on your pocket in terms of managing it, running it, and so on and so forth. So if you look at Tesla, for example, the value of that company is not $500 billion because, or maybe more, because that company has kind of cracked how do you use batteries, for example, to run the car. That's not the point. I think batteries and running cars on batteries has been there for a long time now. Fundamental shift that has happened is that the outcome and the pleasure of that car is completely different from a simple battery operated running car. So that is a fundamental difference there. If you're looking at banks, historically, banks have been fantastic in trying to keep your money and and also, of course, charge you for withdrawing money sometimes, right? Your own money. You keep your money, they charge you to withdraw your own money. They give you loans and they charge you a humongous amount of processing fees for those loans. And their approach towards customer has been, I wouldn't say rude, but to a large extent, very customer non-friendly, right? Experience is not on top of their mind. And whereas what is happening today is in the outcome-based model, there are fintech organizations coming up and they are trying to create an experience around anything and everything that you do. So if it is bank, They're saying, hey, while you do banking, we will ensure wealth enhancement for you. So it's not only keep the money. If you're my client, I will do and I will go this extra mile and I will create this outcome or goal in your life. So is the case with connected homes. Initially the home started to get connected, and you had the camera and you can see it. You can see it on your mobile phone when you're outside. And something good to have. But eventually, all of these connections are looking to create an outcome, which could be again to create an experience, B, to reduce your cost of electricity, manage your homes better, manage groceries at home, anything that could be worked around with these connected devices eventually helps you to derive an outcome to make your life easier. And they are measured in that way. The second model, and of course I can keep talking about it. I can talk to you about education. Education is done fundamentally. I used to keep saying that there will be no schools to go to in the future. There will be no colleges to go to in the future. There will be no exams. Can you imagine being a chartered accountant without having to give an exam? I can't imagine that, but I'm saying this is very likely to happen in the near future. Why? Because education has fundamentally changed. Outcome of the education is important. Degrees are not important. Marks are not important any longer. It's not that you come out with a degree that you've scored #1 rank in SSC or 99%. That's not important. What skill you have derived is likely to be very, very important in the future. And if you see the education with the tech coming in, it is actually taking you to those last benchers where probably he could not seek the first rank, but he or she, now you're able to gauge that, okay, maybe mathematics is not good, maybe science is not good, but the guy who's scoring the first rank, maybe his maths is above average, his science is above average, and so on and so forth. So I'm saying again and again, outcome in healthcare and all of that. The second thing that you're looking at in a business model is hyper personalization. And why am I talking to you about all of these models? I'll probably try and get to it a little later, but very important for us to understand the shift of what is happening, for us to understand what would mean for fraud and forensic in the future. The second model is hyper personalization. Now, anything and everything that you do in today's world is likely to be hyper personalized. It's probably maybe not today, but it's likely to be hyper personalized. And I'm sure all of us would have seen this model where, for example, you walk into a Nike showroom, you will have design A, or you can choose between design B. But you may like the color of design A and the style of design B, and you're not able to choose between both of those. Here is where hyper-personalization comes in. You may like your thumbs up, which is slightly more stronger compared to Coke, but you may like it between Coke and thumbs up, for example. So can I create my drink on the fly, for example? This is going to be very interesting for movies and music. Music is no longer going to be music. It's going to be lyrics. It's going to be tunes. It's all going to be broken into pieces. So much so that you will be able to construct something on the fly, what you like, and then you would come back with not maybe a 4-minute music, but maybe a 2-minute music, and so on and so forth. And that's hyper personalization. Similarly, when we provide services as professionals, it's likely to be more and more hyper personalized. And we'll probably talk about it some other day. And the third model, which is coming into play, is access versus ownership. And now this is something that I think all of us are very much aware about, where I think everything is moving to cloud. So that is a model where cloud, of course, is an abused word, but nobody wants to own servers. Nobody wants to own technology. But when you come to real life, you realize that, for example, and the best example that would be Airbnb, for example, right? Airbnb does not hold any assets, but lets you enjoy the entire experience of running a hotel or company, right? Uber does not own taxis, but lets you enjoy the entire business of taxis. And similarly in India, during the wedding seasons, and these are the seasons, you would want to buy a dress which is worth 3 lakh rupees, and you would probably just wear it once, probably just not wear it any other day other than your wedding day. And I'm saying, why would you want to wear a dress which is 3 lakh rupees? Why not 10 lakh rupees if you could borrow that dress for just 10,000 bucks? So that is access versus ownership. And you see this trend across the world in terms of able to create tools, technologies, and you're able to access the technology for a given value. AWS is a fantastic example of that. They not only give you storage. So for example, there are some companies who sell storage to you. So you can have 100 GB, 200 GB. AWS comes and tells you, hey, you know what? The moment you hit storage. And if you take out maybe 10 MB, I will just charge you $2 for that, right? So they are breaking it down to an amazing level of access and ownership there. And all these three are driving the digital forays for almost all the industries, as you would look at. And I think the digital forays are again across industries and across all the processes of industries. So there are some items where the digital foray is for the growth of the industry. There's some item where you use, some items means I'm saying some processes where you use technology, where maybe efficiency is driven. And there are some processes where experience is driven. So right from the customer care to user onboarding to the growth of the organization, you will see a fantastic amount and trillions of dollars of digital investment likely to go through. And you could look at aviation. It seems logistics is likely to be interesting, where logistics will become more crowdsourcing. For example, if you invite a packet which comes for you, a FedEx, for example, will get a packet into India. They will store it in their warehouse, and then from their warehouse, they'll ship it to you. But crowdsourcing could come in probably. For example, that packets could be stored in houses like yours and mine. And when we're going to office tomorrow, we could actually deliver that packet to somebody. So, and there are a lot of these business models coming in. Fundamentally, what is happening with these business models are that consumers are becoming producers. And that's what I keep saying everywhere. You and me are actually coming into the forefront. For example, if you look at banks, API banking is driving us very close to consumers. So there's a fintech company, they go and talk all the way to your core banking solution. Now, if all of this is likely to happen where APIs are actually hitting your core technologies, whether it be insurance, whether it be banking, whether it be a hotel industry or all of that, now, how would somebody understand the dynamics of even trying to comprehend where is the fraud, when does it come in, how do you identify it, how do you follow it up, and how do you create the chain of evidence and so on and so forth? I think I don't have all the answers, and I'm sure Satish, of course, will take you and dive you through some of these questions which are there in everybody's mind. But these are the complex scenarios that we're looking forward to. And that's where I take you back to what I and Satish had discussed probably a day or two back, saying I actually went to the extent of saying that there will be no frauds tomorrow. So I don't know why we've written those standards, but I think literally there will be no frauds tomorrow. And bear me for a couple of minutes in terms of what I'm trying to express and what I'm trying to impress upon you. There were times when and maybe 3 or 4 decades from now, not very far, fraud means defrauding people, taking money from them and not paying it back to them. Simple fraud. Forging a signature on the check used to be one of the simplest form of frauds. Taking away the cash from petty cash was an amazingly simple amount of fraud. And forging a signature on a property document and then taking away the large office Deepji has was again a very easy fraud to do. And I'm sure he's digitized it now. And these frauds used to be in the region of $1 million, $2 million. And they were in that region. And what was our reaction to that fraud? Deepji would make sure that his property documents are with somebody who's the most believed in person in his office, could be even a relative for all we care, and somebody with really high integrity, correct? So that was the control that we kind of, established at that point in time. You could see the fraud, you could feel it, you could actually put somebody and then, cross your fingers that nothing goes wrong. And forensics in these cases were more physical, right? So you would come to office if something goes wrong, you will actually try to catch the person, you'll try to establish a trend line there and so on and so forth. What's happened maybe 2 or 3 decades back, I think maybe 2.5 decades back, you had frauds like Enron, balance sheet frauds, right? Treasury frauds, Ponzi schemes. You had money disappear with people investing in Ponzi schemes. And what were fundamentally the reason for these frauds is, of course, a huge value, but CEOs and CFOs, they were very greedy for large amount of bonuses, and they kept trying to, do whatever they had to do with those frauds. And these frauds were in the region of maybe from $50 million to $500 million and so on and so forth. And sometimes could even go as high as $1 billion. But sometimes, most of the time, they would range in the range of, on an average, they would be anywhere around $50 to $100 million. So the knee-jerk reaction of the governments across the world was, let's make audit committees more responsible. And let us ask all organizations to establish an enterprise risk management framework. which will then have even the fraud aspects built into it. And if I were to come a little closer in the last decade, you would have frauds like the online frauds, the ATM frauds, the SIM cloning frauds. And these sizes were in the tune on an average of more than 300, 400, $500 million. And again, on an averages, they would be more than what we would have seen before. And what happened when these frauds started coming up? Like Deepji said, there were fraud reporting guidelines which came up, right? That if there was even an inclination of there is a fraud coming in, or you've identified something, you need to report it. Governments were getting more and more edgy, that audit committees could not do anything, but they, large banks, if they have frauds, how do you capture them? Large organizations, if they have fraud, how do you capture them? There was Bribery Act, which came in so that, people could take care of that internationally. And the big four consulting companies really had a field day because they started to integrate the ERM frameworks with complex what can go wrong scenarios into a fraud risk frameworks, right? And eventually we all ended up with a huge set of Excel sheets, which even till date, after spending 20 years, I have no idea what they really mean, because the Excel sheets itself become so complex today. And things like Bribery Act, sometimes, even in India, organizations come up and ask us that, would you like to look at Bribery Act? Have you done, are you a fraud and forensic organization? Would you be able to review our processes? How do you even test the integrity of the employees that you have in terms of a Bribery Act? But anyway, nevertheless, there was processes around it, and everything is becoming so much rule-based. So, and I'm sure something good will come out of all of this. But what is happening in the last decade, in the last maybe 5 years or 10 years, you are having frauds like the SWIFT fraud. You're having money transfer frauds. You're having data frauds. And data frauds, and all of them are so dynamic, huge. They have so much of impact that organizations are lost. And on an average, these frauds are more than $1 billion frauds, literally $1 billion frauds. And I'm sure all of us here on this forum today would have heard about, if nothing less, would have heard about the SWIFT fraud, where almost $1 billion of a value of money was likely to be transported out of a bank from Bangladesh, and they were supposed to get into 4 or 5 banks. God save the bank. The fraudster did a mistake, and he made a spelling mistake, he or she. Now, I'm not sure, but he or she made a spelling mistake, and only $80 million came out of that account and went into a bank account, whereas $920 million actually fell through, and it could not go through the final lag. But can you imagine just a SWIFT account having a root ID to the SWIFT? Somebody could just sitting in the bank transfer $1 billion to multiple banks across the world, and then you would have never found a trace of that money because the color of the money is all green at the end of the day. So that is the kind of fraud that we are expecting to see, or maybe we are seeing that today. And they are huge frauds, and somebody could not even have envisaged something like this. Now comes the interesting part. Like, for example, of course, the control here is, and I'm sure Deepji and Satish would have all contributed to this as well. Large banks are trying to set up frameworks integrated with BI solutions, online alerting system, and whatnot. Sometimes the cost of managing those systems are actually higher than probably the cost of the fraud that you would foresee. But for a moment, let's forget about all this. For a moment, let's think through in the next 5 minutes, what is it that we are likely to be hit with? And why did I say that probably there will be no frauds in the future? Now, I'm sure, Deepji, you have huge investments in mutual funds, in equity shares. So I wouldn't ask you how much you own, but where are these investments today, Deepji? Where do you keep them? Where do you really keep these investments? With your treasurer in your office, in some locker? Most of these investments are demat and they are electronic. Fair enough. Everybody understands that. But where are these electronic investments sitting? They are probably sitting in with just 1 or 2 companies in this country. And I'm sure if you take an example, there would be just 1 or 2 companies in the world, in every country, that all of these investments actually go and sit in there. And for example, I mean, just for the sake of example, it could be CAMS and Carvi, for example, in India, where you have the entire mutual fund investment for the entire country sits there. I don't even know whether, it should be protected like a Fort Knox, right? I have no idea what it is. The CAMS uses open source most of the time. I have no idea how they protect it, but I'm sure all these organizations are good organizations and they would do all of what is required to be done, but that they carry the lives and savings of a billion people in this country, right? Because everything sits there. And every time that you try to do something, the responsibility in a mutual fund or equity companies are always shifted to say, hey, you know what? We don't have that. Somebody else has that data. Can you imagine if these companies get together and they do a fraud, right? Countries could go down in seconds. Can you imagine if somebody sitting in this organization is able to do a fraud? It's not a question of a billion. It's not a question of 2 billion. There are billions and billions of dollars. Sometimes you will not be able to even reconcile those $1 billion, right? If I pick out maybe one share of Reliance from Satish's account and one from DG's account and one from so many people's account and just put them into a bucket, by the time that you identify where your single Reliance shares have gone, because I am for sure know that DG does not have a time to reconcile all of these shares to nitty-gritty, but I'm sure you would have also seen in your demat account sometimes some data has come in, something has gone out, something does not reconcile. And of course, if you're not on top of it, you sometimes don't know where they're going. I'm not talking about normal business processes. What I'm talking about is what happens if there is a fraud intent there. Normal business processes and controls are perfectly okay. What happens if the intent is wrong? And what happens then? The second one is large equity companies, organizations, broking houses. They're all working on technology platform today, right? And that is not interesting. The interesting part is 50% of the trades are run by algos, right? So much so that these large platform brokerage organizations who used to charge maybe 2 or 3% have come down to maybe a 0.10% commission or a 0% commission, are asking technology tools to take your decision. And these technology tools are actually running 50% of the market, right? What happens if large 5 organizations across the world get together and they synchronize their algorithms in a manner which has got intelligence built into it to turn around the market, left, right, center, whatever? I know it's not easy. I know the markets are huge and maybe 5 may not make a difference. Could 10 make a difference? Could 15 make a difference? Because if you use an 80-20% thumb rule, 80% of the global trade would be run by 20% of the large organizations, right? It's always the case, whether you talk about trades, whether you talk about business, 80% of the business is done by 10 or 20% of the organization. What happens if large algo companies really put some great intelligence into the system and they run that? I keep saying there will be no accounting in the future because you would have electronic invoices coming in, and they have literally come in today. And Modi ji, for example, should be laughing his way to banks in the future because he knows exactly what Deep G is doing and how much GST he pays, and his profits are known. So he could actually come back with a profit statement to you. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, if you have electronic invoices, code-based, not the ones that they're designed today, what I'm seeing in the future is a code invoice coming in, then frauds are likely to be near real time. No, real time, correct? Because I could throw out 10,000s of invoices and frauds could happen as we speak. And how do you then identify? What do you do around those? Digital payments, fantastic. Our country is slightly more conservative on cryptocurrencies, but the world is moving very fast around cryptocurrencies. So Deepji, RBI, for example, you had the demonetization, and one of the objectives of demonetization was we will identify all the fraudulent currencies running around in the country. Now, fraudulent currencies could be 1,000 crores, 2,000 crores, 5,000 crores, or maybe 10,000 crores. All that comes from China, Pakistan, or whatever it is. 10,000 crores is bearable. But if you have cryptocurrencies coming into picture and somebody wants to defraud the entire country, right, and pump in billions of dollars worth of cryptocurrency, your economy could come down in a moment. And your entire life today could be lost if your Aadhaar or identity is lost, right? So, and the fraud platform could be built on an identity which is yours, mine, Satish's, or anybody's, and somebody could do billions of dollars worth of fraud just looking at all of that. So my friends, the first thing is, I still maintain that you will probably not see frauds tomorrow because the size of the frauds are likely to be so high that by the time you realize that there is a fraud and by the time you're able to comprehend it, all things would have been lost, right? And in that light, I think, of course, we need to work on trying to create more faith and integrity in the system, because I think those controls are very, very important. Having said that, it's a maturity curve that all of us would have to walk up to. And the institute, in their best wisdom, are cognizant of the fact that this is where the future is likely to go to. And it is very important for us to at least establish trust in whatever we do today in a manner that it can be established. And that's the reason that we thought it is very important for us to, and there was a huge white space around fraud and forensic, right? People doing it their way, looking at the best possible way that they could do something, and different sets of people marketing themselves to be fraud for forensic experts. We thought it was high time, important, a necessity to be able to establish a code around it, to be able to establish a standard around it, to make sure that there brings a consistency across the world, as I would say, because I think Satish or Deepji, somebody said that, this is one of the first standards in the depth all across the world that the Institute has, kind of championed the cause. And I must thank my colleagues like Satish and all those who were part of this, where we literally did crowdsourcing. We literally broke it into multiple pieces, built it up in 3 months, demonstrated it, got it out. And I'm sure a lot of professionals and the government and the organizations would be able to benefit from something like this. And I think it's come a long way. I think it's a fantastic starting point. And I think we would, of course, all of us would need to build on top of this as we look into and deep dive into the future. But I think it's a great platform for us to start here. And I think all the professionals would need to quickly understand what are the ways and means of doing things within these standards, because maybe as chartered accountants, as professionals, we could also be held responsible. But the other point was not wanting to hold responsible people. But the point is, when as professionals, you're called to order, either in the court of law or with the government tomorrow, you're able to demonstrate the fact that, look, hey, you know what? You're not all around the place. We have followed a standard, we have followed a code. And in this code and standard, this is what we have done. And this is the output. You're also de-risking yourself as a professional if you follow typical standard, a particular standards, and make sure that you're able to demonstrate that, you followed that. So I think this was a very, very important aspect in terms of our thought processes. And I must also tell you that DAB, Digital Auditing and Accounting Standards Board, is the first one to be being conceptualized across the world, because we believe that auditing and accounting standards are likely to become electronic in the near future. So this is what I thought, DG, I would like to share with your audience today. And I hope, we would be able to make some sense in all of this. But I think we are in interesting times, complex times, something which is very similar to Corona times, but in every chaos, there's an opportunity. And I think there is a great deal of opportunity for people wanting to practice this. And I think the future is likely to be putting in a lot of controls in terms of bots, where CAT solutions or computer-aided solutions, analytic solutions would become a necessity. I don't think you would be able to do anything without any of those that you can think of today. So you would need to everybody would need to get their technology pieces perfectly in order. Thank you, Deepji. And thank you, Satish, for patiently listening to what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anil. Thanks a lot. I think what you said was very interesting and very scary also. But I think as professionals, we need to take it forward, because Peter Drucker said, you are a real futurist, as you have said in your biodata and in your inaugural address also. Because as Peter Drucker said, future is already here. You have to just look outside your window and you can see the future. So like you said, no fraud, no accounting. I think they're the two.
People like us have a lot of time, unlike you, Deepji, and that is why, we get termed ourselves as futurists, where you just keep dreaming and thinking through. And yeah, please go ahead.
Anil has achieved a lot at a young age and going great guns. And I think two takeaways from your entire inaugural address. One is no accounting, no frauds. Very scary, but that's the future, because it will happen in real time. But at the same time, as you rightly said, there is a need for professionals to look at what has happened. We may in future try to build future-proof, fraud-proof systems or whatever. But then once something has happened, some risk incident has taken place, then there is a need for professionals to follow through, work on it. And if they need to work on it, they need to have standards. They need to have principles. They need to have a basic way where they can go to the courts and, present to legal scrutiny what is happening. So I think these standards go a long way in that. So I think there are two parts to it. One is the incidence of fraud, which you talked about. And then, of course, there are the standards. So, so you have talked about the first part more, very interesting, very scary. But
because I have my colleague Satish, who's likely to talk to you about the second part more. Absolutely. So I wouldn't want to take away the laurel of what he has done, because he's the one who's put a lot of time, energy, and gone into nitty-gritty. So much so that, every word that we've written in that standard has been debated, discussed, and even the definition, for example, we wanted to make it very simple. So I'm sure Satish would be able to add more light there than myself. So I thought, let me do the 80,000 feet, and Satish would of course help you to go down to the entire journey of what we had done.
Thank you very much.
Dipji, there is a question, and yes, I'm trying to de-risk my own process. Maybe Anil will give a better answer. There's a question from Rahul, so if you can just address that. Before,
what is the present business market of fraud analytic companies in India? It's a $10 billion market, my friend. Believe me, it's a $10 billion market.
And there's a second
analytics
question.
Platform like Alteryx is valued at $10 billion. That's only just one company. SaaS would be valued at more than $10 or $20 billion. Even a small analytics company today is valued at anything around $4 or $5 billion. Robotics organizations like UiPath, Blue Prism, all of them are valued on an average of around $8 to $10 billion, between $5 and $10 billion. So if you're trying to ask me, what is the market in India? Fantastic market. What is the market in the world? No comparison, boss. If somebody can visualize it, break it, create a solution. The only point which is missing most of the time, it's not only data analytics. Data analytics converging with the business use case is the most important aspect. So if you're able to crack it, I think you're sitting on a gold mine is also not a right response. You're sitting on something much larger, a Fort Knox, for example.
Yes, I think rightly said, because it's a huge market out there. You're absolutely right. And I think people are getting into motion.
And people are willing to pay you any value today. You go to a large bank and tell them that, look, I've got it under control, boss. I will ensure that I will give you a predictive signal if something's likely to go wrong. There is a huge value. Everybody would rush to buy that solution, buy that tool, whatever.
Absolutely. I think there's one more question, Satish.
Yeah. There's one more on the bank.
Yeah. So
seen many debit cards, credit card frauds to use of UPI by certain impersonation, and banks are not able to deal with these frauds. So our Indian banks are not doing enough. And then they do, of course, they are all trying to grapple with the situation, because the onslaught of the digital payments and the onslaught of the fintech companies and even the banks going online very quickly without putting too much thought in their minds are all trying to do a lift and a shift model. A lift and a shift means, jo aaj ghar mein hai, usko maine aaj usko utha ke cloud mein dal diya. But that's not the way that it will work eventually, right? So you need to build in layers. But that maturity would obviously take a lot of time. And that is the reason that it will always crack through. And that's the reason I said it's almost a $10 billion mark. Your question is in your answer is in your second question.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Anil. I think really thanks to you. You have set the tone for this 4-part webinar. May we move on to the Satish.
Thank you, guys. So pleasure is mine. Thank you for inviting me. Great to have interacted with all of you, and look forward to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil.
Bye.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
We move on to our expert speaker. I think Satish, Anil has set the tone. He's done the first part. So you have to do the betting in the second part. So I'll just introduce Satish, a very dear friend again. So I'll introduce him formally again to everyone. Satish Shenoy currently heads the corporate management audit function at Aditya Birla Group with a turnover of nearly $50 billion, which is operations worldwide. I think we have started the tone with Anil talking about billions of dollars only. So we'll carry on with that same thought. He is a chartered accountant, cost accountant, company secretary, and diploma holder in central excise with 8th rank holder in the final CS examinations in 1988. He carries over 39 years of experience in internal audit, risk, forensics and ethics functions in PSU and private organizations such as Hindustan Petroleum, Onida, Lupin, Reliance Retail, and Larsen and Toubro. Incidentally, when we went to Larsen and Toubro for one such presentation, when we had some foreign Canadians and Angolans come over, it was amazing because Satish talked about from nuclear submarines to civil constructions, from pin to everything, whatever they manufacture. Additionally, Satish has also worked with the government on deputation with the Oil Coordination Committee, and he's closely associated with number of bodies, almost all the professional bodies in the country: Institute of Internal Auditors, Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, Institute of Chartered Accountants, Institute of Cost and Management Accountants, and trade bodies like ASSOCHAM, FICCI, and PSDCCI, and of course, some Audit Systems and Softwares Private Limited, because we go back 30 years, and I think Satish and I would have gone and spoken to more than, as we were talking earlier, more than 20 different, bodies we would have spoken to, professional bodies we would have spoken together in the last 30 years. He's an avid cricket player, has a special passion for driving and trekking, and he also loves listening to classical music and English songs. So I think a must, because again, I'm quoting Peter Drucker, that other than your main work, which you should have a passion for, you should also have a passion for something else like art or music. So Satish loves listening to classical music and English songs. So with that, Satish, you have to take over this next 3.5 days and take us through the forensic accounting and investigation standards.
Thank you, Dipji. Thank you, everybody. Is the voice quite clear? Is it clear? Yeah, fine. So good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I think people have come from all parts of the world with a lot of expectations. I have to come for this webinar with a lot of expectations because each revision kind of smoothens the rough edges. And because this topic is a little different, it's new, there's no benchmarks, and there's no kind of something that this is the standard and therefore it's easy to speak about. It's not been there for a long time enough to kind of hear others speaking and imbibe from them. Anil Bhandari, of course, did such a fantastic job, and he said 80,000 feet, but I think it was twice that feet because I think it goes outside the orbit. So to quickly come down from that level and come down to the grassroots level is what I'm charged with doing by what Dipji has kind of made this program. So when we formulated this program, what we thought was that we will break it up into 4 parts. So today we had Anil, giving us a very high top-end view of how these standards and why these need of these standards, and sometimes he also says whether there is a need for these standards. But literally, he's been also through the whole journey, and therefore, and his experience and his futuristic thoughts, of course, lend a lot of credibility in what he says. So let's now, for a moment, keep those thoughts aside and come down to the actual brass tacks. Before we really get into the document, what I really wanted to do was is as follows. What I'll do is about 15 minutes, I'll talk about the entire landscape of, maybe Dipji, this thing can be shared in another 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes or so. So what I thought was, what I'll do is just talk about the entire process of how these standards come. It's not just, somebody writing some 112 pages and somebody editing it and somebody cut pasting and doing all those things and it comes out. There's a rigorous process by which this standards come out. That's an ICAI process, which is the Institute of Chartered Accountants for the benefit of the foreign participants. So the CA Institute has a particular process, which I'll just very briefly talk about. So that should take about 10 or 15 minutes, which means by about 7 o'clock, I'll really get down to talking about. So the sessions, as we predicted, would be in 4 parts. Today is the first part. I'll be talking about the overarching 3 documents in detail, in specific points. Then tomorrow we will be having we'll be talking about these set of standards, which is the 100 series. Day after tomorrow, we'll do the 200 series, and on Thursday, we'll do the 300 series. So with that, we will be able to talk about all the standards that are actually put up. Besides that, there are, of course, some standards which have been put up for public review. I think the date has already passed by, but those are also, those, of course, we will not talk about it now. We'll talk about it when probably the standards are released. So with this will be the format for us. So let me get quickly into talking about how this standards really came about, and what exactly is the way in which this went up. So these are the standards which have come out, which have been issued by the ICAI, which is the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And this was the diktat was that to prepare standards on the forensic accounting and investigation, right? So that was the first part. And many times forensic audit is the term that people use, that all of us use, but there is a distinction between what is a forensic audit and a typical internal audit. What was the background for this FAIS? FAIS means Forensic Accounting and Investigation Standards. Instead of talking right through this presentation, instead of saying Forensic Accounting and Investigation Standards, I'll abbreviate to FAIS so that it comes easier on the ears. So the background for issuing this FAIS was that because of the number of frauds and irregularities which have come up over the past few years, which Anil has also spoken about. So this became, so there was a need for, to unearth these financial statement irregularities, to unearth all and have a standard method of really doing this. And therefore the CA Institute, the ICAI, thought of having a comprehensive set of standards which will address these aspects. The speed at which these things move is pretty phenomenal. Given the impression that we have, or I'm sorry to say that, but we think that it's a slow process. So in about June or July, in July or August, the Digital Accounting Board explored the possibility of having this standards, and here we are in February. Almost 80% of the 70% of the standards have been issued. So the ICAI Council accepted the proposal of the DAB. DAB is the Digital Accounting Board, to issue the standards. The four principles why this has come about is to standardize and harmonize the whole process of conducting these assignments. Just to have a standardized methodology and to harmonize this the entire conduct of the assignment. There was also a need to discover evidences, which will be subject to a high level of scrutiny in a court of law. And Anil also spoke about it. Dibji also spoke about this. The important aspect, the biggest differentiator between an audit, of course, even in an internal audit, one has to substantiate all the audit observations. But here is a case where these evidences will have to be substantiated in a court of law and with the highest scrutiny. And the ICAI intellectual property, this is the only accounting body to really have done really a matter of pride for the nation, not for me. I mean, as for a nation, that the Indian body has been able to do it, is the first body to do this worldwide. And also for the capacity building for our members to provide the FAIS services to the government and other law enforcement agencies. So what really was done was, a team was formed of 9 experts to help along with about 5 of the Central Council members. And this was called a subgroup, the FAI study groups, not a subgroup, a study group. And we used to meet every week for 5 months. Every week for 5 months, there were about 30 meetings that were there. Every single week, we used to meet on a Monday from 4 to 5 or 4:30 to 5:30 Indian Standard Time. And the meetings would start on time and sometimes drag on because there would be more opinions that would come up. But So there were a lot of back and forth which is to happen for each of them. And then finally, on 1st of September, it was decided to launch these standards. And in February 2021, these standards have seen the reality of the day. So what was first envisaged was that what are the full list of standards that are required, because only then we would be able to break up the components and people could have started working on it. For each of the standards, there was a working team which was there, and there would be about 6 to 7 members in each of these working teams. So there was a total of about 60 people from all kinds of backgrounds, from the industry, from consulting firms, from individual firms, from large cities like Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Chennai, Bangalore, etc., Hyderabad, to smaller towns like Jaipur, Pune. And at this point, I must bring out a little small emphasis that the inputs that we got from the participants from smaller towns was something phenomenal. I've seen people like Uday from Pune, or Naman from Jaipur, or Durgesh from Ahmedabad, really coming out with things which we thought, sitting in Bombay and Delhi and Calcutta, and we thought that we've been there and done these things before. And I was really pleasantly surprised to see the amount of dedication, the amount of actual assignments that they have been working on. And it was a very disciplined process. And finally, the public exposure, which I'll talk about, also finally took place. So the uh, what was the plan was, I mean, there were some overarching documents like the preface, framework, and basic principles, which we'll talk about today. Then there was a 100 series, which was on key concepts. Then the 200 series talked about the engagement management. The 300 to the 400 series, the 400 we have not yet touched it. We have just stopped at 300 as of now, but we have kept space for 300 to 400 for executing assignments. This is the actual execution of assignments. The 500 series we have retained for specialized areas, and 600 is the overall quality control. And of course, the 700 for definition and glossary. So the plan was to have 24 such documents, of which 16 are completed, which we'll talk about in the next, between today and the next 3 days. And what is in work in progress is, there are 8 documents which are work in progress. And out of that 8, 7 have already been exposed for public review. So this is what the aspects are. So there is a list of documents, list of, in the overarching documents, as I said, the preface, framework, basic principles. In the key concepts, which we'll be talking about tomorrow, is nature of assignment, the fraud risk, the laws and regulations, sorry, applying hypothesis. Then the 200 series talks about engagement management, which talks about engagement objectives, engagement acceptance and appointment, which is a very, very important standard 220, I think. Then using the work of an expert, which is standard 230, which is very, very crucial. And we'll talk about this as well. Engaging with agencies, because that is the integral part of one of the takeaways of the standard is how do we engage with agencies and communication with the stakeholders. The series 300 talks about executing assignments, 300 and 400, but we have not yet touched 400. But that talks about planning the assignment, the evidence and documentation, conducting work procedures, conducting interviews, the review and supervision, the reporting of the results, and testifying before competent authorities. So this is how the entire execution of the assignments are envisaged in the standards. So why am I saying all this is just to tell all of us the amount of detailing that has actually gone while framing these standards. And then we would have the 500 series, which is specialized areas, which talks about applying data analytics, evidence discovery in a digital domain, loans and borrowings, and related and connected parties. And the 600 series will be about quality control. So this is the comprehensive view that probably will talk about the entire scope of the standards. And there was a lot of participation of the stakeholders in the standard development process. In fact, these were exposed at different dates as they got ready, as the standards got ready, as the preface got ready, as the framework got ready. So all these things were actually exposed for public comments, and the comments of those people who gave us the comments, gave the institute their responses. Those responses were also incorporated in the standards. So there were people, there were the council members, the ICAI staff, the regional councils, the teams, the practice members in practice, members in industry, the governments, the regulators, and there were so many others who actually gave responses. There were about over 300 responses, which 250 responses which came, and we had the council members also had personal interaction with with various senior level people of corporates, and also met the SEBI, the CAG, the MCA, the BCA, the regional offices, etc. I mean, just for the benefit of foreign participants, these are all the regulators like the SEBI, CAG, the MCA. These are all the regulators in India which operate. So there was a lot of interaction with them as well, so that there could be some kind of a handhold. So the overarching documents are three. The 100 series, there are 4 documents, 4 standards. In the 200 series, there are again 4 documents, 4 standards. And in the 300 series, there are 5 standards which have been really introduced. So very quickly, I'll talk about the preface. Before I get into the document, I'll talk about the preface. And in the preface, so there are 3 overarching documents which are there: the preface, the framework, and the basic principles. So we'll talk about it in the next 45 minutes or so. We'll talk about all these 3 documents in great detail. But for the moment, what I would need to say is, so what was the way in which we went about this entire process was that the Digital Accounting Board selected the topic and the timelines. So that was given to the study team, that this is the entire roadmap. So it was like a project, implementation of a project. And I remembered my L&T days when the company had everything to do with projects. So it was almost like a project setting, project environment of fixing dates on what will start, what can run parallelly, what is dependent on the previous standard, etc. So a lot of things went on in parallel, but dates were given for all of them. Then there was a study group which was formed to draft and review the standards. So there was a detailed process about that. I'll talk about it later when we are talking about the document in specific. Then the first draft came out, which was again reviewed by the Digital Accounting Board. Then there was an exposure draft which was open for inputs for 30 days, because that's the process of the CA Institute, where the exposure draft is actually given and put up for public review, and any one of us has the right to suggest for any improvements, and those were then finalized. It came back to the study group. The study group went through the comments, accepted some of the comments, had a reason why we are rejecting some certain comments, and made changes as were necessary, and finally submitted to the council. Then the central council then deliberates upon this and issues the final version of the FAIS. So that's the kind of rigor with which things really happen. Then came the framework and the definitions. So there were some basic principles, the key concepts, the standards and the guidance, and the code of ethics. These are the way in which the entire the framework was there. The definitions part also for each of them, which I'll come to a little later, was keenly discussed. And there is a fixed format for the standard. So any standard of the CA Institute has a fixed format. So we had something called the introduction and scope, which is a brief background and the scope of the standard. We had a paragraph on the objectives, which was the purpose for why the standard was issued. Then we had the requirements, the explanatory comments, the documentation of work processes, work procedures, and of course the effective date. And in the basic principles, which I'll talk about specifically when I talk about the document which contains the basic principles, there were 10 different basic principles, 5 of which are attributes and 5 of which are needed for conduct of the assignment. So what are the attributes that are really there? The attributes that we are talking about is independence, integrity and objectivity, due professional care, confidentiality, skills and competence. These were the 5 attributes which are required. And for conducting it, we required contextualization of the situation, the primacy of truth, respecting rights and obligations, separating facts from opinions, and quality and continuous improvement. So these are the, I mean, the basic, the background of how these standards have, and that's how the whole document kind of got stitched up. So now I'll request Dibji to kind of share the first document, which is, I mean, share the entire standards, the 112-page document. So in the next 45 minutes, I'll run us through all run us through about 1/4 of that document, and we can talk about, and I'll talk about what specifically was the points which came up for discussion in the entire meeting, to the extent I can probably recollect and give it out. So all this is done with most humility, most sincerity, and I may not have. I sincerely confess that I might not have answers to any or all the questions that are raised to me, because things are so dynamic in the forensic in the FAI space. But I'll do my best to address and give out everything that I learned in this process. It was a very humbling process, let me tell you. And also through this medium and through various other mediums that I'm actually fortunate to receive. The request is that since more and more of us kind of get involved in these kind of processes, it's better for our own professional upliftment. It's also good for the profession collectively, because I keep saying that we can't blame culture for it. By what can we do? What can I singly do? So the history has taught us that there are several people who never thought like this and took things ahead. I'm not telling any one of us to become a Mother Teresa or a Satya Sai Baba or something like that, or a Mahatma Gandhi for that matter. It's not that, but I think each one of us should be in a position to contribute to the efforts of any professional body that one is associated with, not necessarily the CA Institute, but whatever professional body, spare some time for it, and we ourselves will realize that we grow, so professionally over a period of time. So let me not talk about all this, and let me come down directly to the first page or the second page of this document, which is the foreword by our president of the CA Institute. And the CA Institute is always striving for perfection, integrity, and assurance. And when the word of chartered accountant comes to somebody's lip, it is always synonymous with excellence. So just take it up a little. And then there was a pressing need for us to take it up. There was a pressing need for us, for the CA Institute, to come up with these kind of guidelines. Yeah. So then, Bhaskar, that's it. So I think in the next couple of push-ups up and down, I think Jairam and I will be able to kind of synchronize the slides. The Digital Accounting Board, Accounting and Assurance Board, DAB for short, just as FAIS, there is DAB, which is the Digital Accounting and Assurance Board. The DAB took up this responsibility of undertaking this research work and developed a standard which is world class. So these standards, when it was being drafted, the emphasis was not on just making it fit for Indian conditions. The entire global perspective was kept in mind when we were actually drafting this document. And I'm very proud to say that on behalf of all of us around, that the CA Institute is the only accounting body which felt the need for this kind of standards and have actually come out with such a full-fledged document. So there are many things written about data analytics and AI and machine learning and things like that, which is also coming up when we are talking about the series 500. So the chartered accountants are now fast emerging as the front runners for all the new techniques which have come. Anil Bandari, as a chartered accountant, is talking so much about the future, which is, and Dibji has already told us that Peter Drucker told us long back that, you know, the future is already now. You know, it's no longer the future. The future is merging seamlessly with the present. And unless and until we start, seamlessly adopting all these, we will, of course, uh, you know, we have to be very, 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 very quick on the take. The other thing is the FAIS was also kept up with the mind that we will be required, because our report will be produced as evidences in the court of law, and we will be required to present as an expert, not just as a witness, one among the witnesses, but as an expert, in all the professional bodies, be it the CBI, the SFIO, the EOW, the RBI, the ED. So anywhere we go, these and our reports are going to be used as an evidence for, the judgment. We will be called as expert witnesses. And the one word that you keep on hearing through the standards is that these standards are principle based. When I say that these standards are principle based, means that these are at the top level. It is the what of it. It's not the how. So whenever these standards are being drafted, whenever through the document, principle based means the what is addressed and not the how. For the how, there is guidance notes. There are different other documents which will be made available at a later point in time to describe the how part of it. This is only restricted to the what of it. So there's also something about codifying the best practices, creating quality benchmarks, and it's an overview of the domains, how to undertake projects, how to conclude the work, how to report findings, and again, the word of principle based. So pardon me for sometimes overemphasizing the word of the talk of principle based, but this is something that is coming through right through the document. I've already talked about what the standards are, what is going to be the. So here are the set of few people who have contributed to it, but I think we can skip this portion. We can go ahead. Uh, so that's what the. So finally, these the idea of this making these standards is this will support all the members in discharging their duties as a highly valued, trusted advisors, and groom them as stalwarts in the profession, and to educate all of us in this. So Mr. Manu Agarwal was the chairman, and Daya Sharma was the vice chairman for this committee, and the entire table of contents is as follows, which we can just run through. So it's all available. I've already spoken about it a bit, and we'll be talking about this in the next couple of days. So as we move further, uh, we will be talking about now the first document, which is the preface. The preface is one of the three overarching documents, and we'll talk quickly about the preface in about 10-15 minutes. I'll cover the preface. So when, as I said, there is a specific format for the standards. So we talk about why it was, the introduction to it, the objectives. We'll talk a little bit about the DAB, the DAB, and then the framework, the standards, and so on and so forth. So just, I think we'll move ahead and come down to. So this is the why this entire standards have come is to facilitate the understanding of the scope and authority of the pronouncements. So the FAIS at a broad level will equip the professionals with the minimum standards that are required for undertaking forensic work. It will also talk about the quality of service that we are giving as a professional, and what can be, and also tells the clients or the ones who's appointing us, be it the regulators, be it the client, be it the government agencies, to what they can expect from a particular FAIS assignment. And this is very important because the expectations need to be set right. If the expectations are not set right at the beginning, then whatever work we do probably will not meet its requirement. And it will, in general talk, will give us guidance about the implementation and the related practical issues. The standards are principle based. Again, this emphasis is there, but it's a point of emphasis because these are principle based. This will not, we'll have to adapt this to very specific situations. Because if we had got into very, very specific guidelines, then probably this would have been a 5,000 page document. So the intention is not to make a 5,000 page document. The intention very clearly in any standards, and that's the standard process, is to just talk about the guiding principles, to talk about the what of the assignment rather than talking about the how. So it is talking about the application of FAIS, the skills that are required, the use of some tools and techniques, which will vary and depend upon each of the specific assignments. So each of these standards will have a predefined framework, and it will have a consistent application of the basic principles, the best practices, and the standards for each of our assignments. So the four, there are, just come to 3.2. So in the 3.2, the framework will have the basic principles, the key concepts, the standards, and the guidance that are really available. Please move ahead. And we'll come down now to the FAIS as such. So it's a minimum set of requirements that will apply to all the members of the ICAI. The CA Institute, the ICAI, can only give guidelines to its members. It can't make it applicable to all across. So many times in our, when we do the audits, we have engineers in our teams. We have these IT experts in the team who might not necessarily be chartered accountants. But the CA Institute has got authority to only issue guidelines for its own members. However, what the CA Institute, of course, is ICAI is seized of this and is taking up with the ministry for making sure that these guidelines become the base for other institutes to also come into to have similar such guidelines. But this is, as I said, the primal document on basis of which I'm sure there will be further guidance available from other institutes as well. There will be an effective date from when this will get mandated. As of now, it is recommendatory in nature, and as we move along, there will be a process for actually making it mandatory. And it is a duty of every professional to ensure that we comply with this standard. So the standards also talk about the FAI report or any other communication. The report is, of course, a formal document, but it covers any other communication which is there. And this will draw attention to the material. And wherever we have not been able to follow the standard, our report or any other communication should clearly indicate what is the deviation and the reasons why we have deviated from not following anything which is specifically talked about. The standard setting process, which I briefly talked in my opening remarks. So the DAB develops these standards, revises these standards, exposure drafts are prepared and issued to various interest groups and the public at large for their inputs, feedback, and comments. And then the DAB again reviews these comments and places it before the Council of the CA Institute for further deliberation and issuance. So, and the contents, again, principle-based, which will only outline the objectives with the essential requirements for its compliance, and the professionals are expected to apply their best judgment while implementing these standards. The implementation and technical guides which will follow are going to be only recommendatory. Those will not be mandatory. So that's how the whole process is there. So each of the standards, as I said, and I talked briefly about this in my opening paragraph before I came into the specific document. So each of these has a fixed section. There are 6 sections, which is the introduction and the scope, the objective, the requirements, the explanatory comments, the documentation of the work process, and the effective date. So these are the 6 components which is going to appear in all the standards. There are 5 series, which are very specific series. 100 series, which we'll be talking about tomorrow in depth. 200 day after tomorrow. 300 on Thursday. and 400 and 500, as 400 is we have not used, but 500, 600 and 700 as we come along. So these guidance notes, which are going to come out specifically, are designed to provide non-mandatory guidance on matters of implementation. And this will also explain how the standard can be actually put to practice. So the institute will issue implementation guides, they will issue technical guides, which will help all of us as professionals to actually do this. So here's the annexure, which I would request each one of you to go through it. This document is available very freely. I think Dibji has already put up the link. If the link is not there, somebody from Sama can put up the link on the chat box. So just hold this annexure 2 for a moment. The annexure 2 talks about, so the whole entire 112-page document is very freely available to all of us. Any one of us can download it, can read it, can use it as a pillow, can use it whichever way they want, so long as some part of that standard gets into us, and more importantly, some part of us get into the standards on a future basis. And this is not cast in stone, so I'm sure that this is not going to be something which is not going to be revised. It's definitely going to see revisions and request each one of us, as I made a plea in my opening remarks, that each one of us should have more association. So here is a list of external stakeholders on whom the inputs were really sought of. And you will see the who's who of the Indian corporate governance structure. I mean, the MCA is there, the MHA is there, the RBI, SEBI, CAG, CGA, NCCC, the NCRB, the CBI, ED, EOW, SFIO, NCLT, IBBI, CERT, IRDA, the Data Security Council, CBDT, CBIC, the ICAI, that is the the Cost Accountants Institute, the ICSI, the recognized stock exchanges of India, the IBA, the SCOPE, the Standing Committee Conference of Public Enterprises, NABARD, the IIMs, the TRI, the Central Register of Corporate Societies. So, I mean, suffice to say, if I'm sure that with these list of 32 institutions, we get a fair idea that, this thing has been run through so many different organizations. And we've also got feedback from some of them, and those have also been incorporated. And so therefore, that's the kind of rigor that has actually gone into this particular activity. So at this point, I'll just take a pause and request that if there's any questions or anything that is there, I'm a kind of a speaker who loves even, I don't call it an interruption at all, but if there's any viewpoint or anything, you can please put it up on the chat box, and I'll be very happy to be to kind of be stopped at any point in time for a better viewpoint than what I have, because I'm here with a very limited perspective. Whatever I have learned and whatever I have, I'm trying to download it. I'm attempting to download it. So if there's any perspective or any other viewpoint, I'm more than happy to take it. And I'll request Dibji at any point in time to kind of stop me at any point in time. I'll be more than happy to kind of discuss or deliberate upon any issue that has been talked about. And if I'm going too fast, please stop. Please slow me down. Please give me an indication to slow me down. If I'm going too slow, please give me an indication to stop, to expedite. But one thing is for sure, I'll not go beyond 8 o'clock, and I'm talking about 8 p.m. today, not 8 p.m. tomorrow, Indian Standard Time. So be rest assured that you'll have to tolerate me for just the next 40 minutes or so, and not or so, but 40 minutes or less. So don't worry about dinner, don't worry about anything else. I'll definitely stop. I'm a person who stops well exactly on time. And we'll also break a little earlier, I thought 10 minutes or so, for any question and answers. So if there is a flow of questions which are coming in, I too will get an indication of the flow of communication. So probably I can also go a little faster or go a little slower, such that we meet the timelines. The effective date, as I can see comments, and no sir business, please address me as Satish. I'm very comfortable with that. So the effective date, yes, there is a lot of questions on the effective date. The effective date has yet not come because there are certain processes that need to be followed before it can become effective. But however, this will be a guideline, and since it is recommendatory, I would recommend each one of us to follow the guidelines whenever we are doing forensic accounting and investigation standard assignment. So I think that was the question. I could only read a few 4 or 5 words of that question without really getting into the chat box. But Deepti, I'm giving you this, I'm tasking you with this requirement that you can stop me at any point in time if you see a question which is worthy of the topic I'm talking about. So I'll just take a pause for a sip of water.
Sure, Satish, I think it's no problems at all. I think we are going through a very good pace, a nice pace, so that we can imbibe, we can understand what is all there in the standard.
Good. So thank you very much. I am sure you're voicing the opinion of all the for 50 people present in this thing, and I hope the number stays at 50 because I get an indication.
Here, and there are another 35, 40 people on the YouTube channel also.
Fair. Yeah, I'm sorry I excluded that in the count because I couldn't see them. Jo dikhta hai wo bikhta hai bolta hai na. So that's so yeah. So to all the 80, I think when I'm in a classroom with physical presence, I always worry about the ones near the door, and I always worry about the ones on the last bench, whether because I am myself a last bencher. So I worry about them, and I always tell Dipji, please lock the door from outside, not inside, so that nobody can leave the room. And whatever they want to do, they have to do within the room. I'm also wary of people who have imbibed the art of sleeping with their eyes open, and I've come across few of them in the various seminars that I've spoken, that they've imbibed the ability to keep to sleep with their eyes open. So I'm wary of such people. Fortunately or unfortunately, there are no backbenchers here. There is no doors to lock from outside. There's only a button to press for disengaging, the end button, as I could see in the Zoom call. But I hope that all of us last through till we come to a logical end. So I'm very grateful that all of you have come. It just shows the willingness and the passion for learning, and I hope I'm doing my best to make sure that whatever I've got an experience in the last 4 months as part of this team, I'm more than ensuring that it comes out in every which form it can. So let me now move on to the next document, which is called the Framework Governing Forensic the FAIs. So this is the framework which we are talking about, and this again has the typical contents. It's the introduction and scope, the objectives, the definitions, the framework, the code of ethics, and the components of the framework. So why this framework is required? The framework is required because the framework will lay down the underlying principles and the boundaries, within which we will be undertaking this assignment. Because in a typical FAIS, and my experience also tells me this, that it's sometimes very difficult to lay out the boundary. You know how we are having boundary disputes with Nepal, we are having boundary disputes with China and Pakistan and Bhutan and I don't know who all. And I'm sorry if I've used Bhutan. I don't know whether there are officially any boundary disputes with Bhutan. But it's pretty difficult to kind of lay down these boundaries. But however, the framework attempts to give us the underlying principles and also talk about the boundaries before which when we take up any specific assignment, and also to preserve and enhance the quality of practice, because the expectations are so high. I said that the CA is tantamount or synonymous with excellence. So to preserve this and enhance this is what the standards are really going to talk about. So the framework includes or it covers all types of forensic accounting and investigation work that we are going to do. This is the standards will apply in all cases of engagements which we are talking about in the FAIS space. And I have said this, and it's a cost, at the cost of repetition, I'm saying this again, that this evidence is going to be used for litigation and prosecution. So we have to be very wary that we have to weigh each of the words that have been used, because at a futuristic, when everything is going good, no problem. Nobody reads or nobody worries about what is written. But the moment something goes wrong, or the moment this comes up as an evidence, every full stop, comma, and semicolon has and interprets. And that time it becomes difficult to say that while I wrote what I wrote, I meant something else. That opportunity is lost to us. And that is why it is very important that we are mindful of the fact that these reports are going to be used for litigation and prosecution. Okay, this of course does not apply. It is very clearly spelled out that these will not apply to any forensic work steps as part of an assurance process, such as a statutory audit or an internal audit or any other attest functions that we will be undertaking. So the important thing is that this per se, it must be starting as a forensic assignment, forensic FAIS assignment, and only then it will be applicable. So the objectives of this framework is basically to get an overall understanding of the FAIS, outline the manner in which these components come together, and what is the interrelation, and what is this to be done in a very cohesive manner, and maintain and continuously improve. As I said, a CA is synonymous with excellence. So what is it? What is it that is there to maintain and improve the quality of the FAIS services? There are many definitions. Just come up to the definitions 3.2.1. Yeah, 3.2.1. These are very specific, and I've not highlighted them because I can't have an opinion on these definitions. And the definition, and as chartered accountants, we all know how we used to mug up the definitions when we used to give the examination. So forensic accounting, as defined in this standard, is a discovery, and there is a standard on discovery of evidences as well. It is a discovery and evaluation of evidences by a professional to interpret and communicate findings suitable in a court of law. And for as an investigation, it is a systematic and critical examination of facts, records, documentation for a specific purpose. There are also brief explanations about the forensic accounting, that it's a discovery of facts and evidence. You have to discover something, because if it is very evident right at the per se something is going wrong, then there is no discovery, and there's probably no need of a FAIS assignment at all in the first place. So something has to be discovered, and this process of discovery is what we are going to talk about. And wherever we have not been able to come out with an opinion, this has to be spelled out very specifically, which will help us in the court of law. Just take me up to 3.2.1. I think we have moved ahead. So Jairam is telling me that probably I should move a little faster. Then 3.3.2. Yeah, so litigation, we have to be mindful of, is a process of handling and settling a dispute in a court of law, and we have to be very careful about that. The investigation is a critical 3.3.3, a critical examination of evidences, documents, facts, and witness statements with respect to an alleged legal, ethical, or contractual violation. So we have also talked about what is a fraud. It's an intentional, deliberate act to deprive another of a property or money through deception or any other unfair means. So these are some of the definitions which have come up. Now we'll move on to section 4, which so the framework establishes the structure. It also has the definition of an FAIS. There are 4 key components and the code of ethics. So just come down, and we have got a graph which is also typically put up here, which is the definitions which we spoke about, the basic principles, the key concepts, the standards, and the guidance. The guidance notes, of course, will come out further. And the base, just take this slide up. The base is the code of ethics, which our institute really has. So this is the entire framework, the definitions, the basic principles, the key concepts, the standards, the guidance, and on the lower layer is the framework is the code of ethics, which is the base of all that we are talking about. So just go up further. So the code of conduct, of course, our institute has a code of conduct, and it is bound by that, and we have to adhere with the code of conduct, and we have to do it with the utmost integrity and sincerity. So this is now for the member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, and therefore we need to abide by it. So let's come to now the paragraph 6, which is the components of the framework. So the basic principles is a core principles fundamental to conducting the assignments. The basic principles are critical to achieve the desired objectives. That is the most important part of it. And the principles, which I'll of course talk about a bit later, but there are 10 principles which I also spoke about in my opening remarks. I will come to it a little later in the third document that we'll be talking about. Okay, and then the key concepts, of course, is the nature of engagement, the fraud risk, laws and regulation, and applying hypothesis. And there's a separate standard on applying hypothesis, which we'll talk about when we are talking about that as well. So we have now understood that the FIS is a uniform performance of and evaluation criteria, methods, processes, and practices. It is the basis for conducting all the forensic work. It is the enables the professionals to discharge their responsibilities. And I'll just again read out without giving my own versions of the truth. Since they are principle based, they define the desired outcome rather than prescribing a series of procedures or activities to be performed to get the desired outcome. The professional is expected to apply his best judgment with regard to the procedures and activities required to be conducted to achieve the desired outcome. So the guidance will be there. There will be further guidance note, implementation guides, and technical guides which are in the pipeline, which again the DAB has been tasked to do, and there will be a study group for that as well. So guidance notes, implementation guides, the technical guides. So that is the how part of the standard. So I said the standards are the what part. So these guidances will be the how part of the work. And so obviously this will help us for designing the forensic accounting procedure and investigating work procedures. So that brings me to the end of the framework. And I see that we are doing pretty well on time. It's 7:35. And if Dibji, if there's any questions, anything, I can take a pause so that.
Just one question.
Yes,
please. YouTube, does it mandate a fraud examiner?
Does it mandate for a fraud examiner as well?
Examiner.
Yeah. So the CA Institute, as I said, is not the CA Institute can't mandate for the world at large. So it is the next task of the CA Institute. Of course, the CA Institute already started working, as I said, with other governing bodies such as the Cost Institute, the ACFE, etc., etc. In fact, we had a couple of people from the ACFE. I myself is on the advisory board of the ACFE Bombay chapter. We had Arpinder Singh, who also, from EY, and his team of people, including Yogesh. Sandeep Ballava was part of the study group. So we already have people from the people who run the ACFE. So in fact, Arpinder is also an advisor to the DAB in some form. And so therefore, a lot of effort is being made to kind of integrate this in a very seamless manner. But as of now, yes, the CA Institute does not, and very clearly does not have the mandate, the authority to dictate the standards for any other institute. So that's how the things stand as of now. But I'm sure over a period of time, these will get mandated right across. Yeah, Devji.
That's it.
That's it. Okay. So now we'll come to the third and the important document, which is the basic principles. Those 10 attributes and the skills that are required for conducting the. So the basic principles again has the same format: the introduction and scope, the objectives, the basic principles, and the effective date. So the introduction, why is this principles required? Because we have understood that the FAIS is a very specialized and requires particular emphasis on attributes and conduct of the practicing professional. It's a very specialized activity which is being undertaken. So it's not something which is very general. And I've done internal audit all my life, so I'm not decrying internal audit, but I'm just saying that these skills, that there are very specific skills which are required, and therefore the DAB, which is a non-standing committee, and I don't want to get into standing committee, non-standing committee, that's for the ICAI, but it's a non-standing committee for whatever it is, but everybody was sitting back for so many years. But the DAB decided to, be a non-standing committee. So they stood up, and not woke up, but they stood up and made sure that these things were done. So this is done, as I said, to harmonize the work which is undertaken by the members, so that we have a common way, we have a common method in which these things are done. And while conducting the FAIS engagements, there is a set of core principles and fundamental to the domain and the work procedures that we are really talking about. And these are very critical to ensure that we ultimately have the desired objectives. It's also for the fact that the stakeholders at large, that means the external stakeholders, will have a reference point. They'll have a reference point for their what they can expect from FAIS professionals. So this document will be a beautiful document for the for kind of making sure that the expectations from the stakeholders are also given. uh, there's a method to how these expectations could come. Also, the project for ourselves, for as FAIS professionals, what procedures need to be conducted, what kind of records that we need to keep, and what should be the basis of our reporting. Because our reports, as I said, are going to come out in the court of law, and we have to be in a position to substantiate each sentence, each comma, each foot stop, each paragraph, each word uh, of our report, or any other communication, not only the report, but any other communication. We should be able to have conviction in what we said and why we said it. And at that point in time, as I keep saying, we can't be saying that this is what I wrote, but this is what I meant. I think that scope is gone out of the bullet is already out of the gun, and we can't afford to change its direction, the speed, and the target. So we have to be very careful about it. And it shall be performed based on these basic principles. And any departure from the principles have to be very clearly disclosed in the engagement report or any other communication. Not only the engagement report, but any other communication, this has to be clearly spelled out. So the objectives of the basic principles is to bring credibility to the professional. It has fundamental features, and it is helps the professional through the entire life cycle, right from the time of engaging, of the engagement letter, the team, the team has to be scoped, what is the scope of the engagement, what is the way in which we conduct our audit, the forensic work, what is the way we collect evidences, what is the way we preserve these documents, what is the way in which we will issue the report, and how we are going to actually make sure that we have a quality control process in place to make sure that we are on top of the assignment. So the basic principles, now I'll come down to the 10 principles. So in the next 10 minutes, I'll, I'll take about a minute for each of these standards. And then, so it will be about 10 to 8. Then I can stop talking. And if there's any questions, we can take it. And in the next 10 minutes after that, and at 8 o'clock Indian Standard Time, we'll wind up as we had planned. So let's dive now deep into each of the 10 basic principles that we are talking about. So the first one is independence. I think even as internal auditors or as professionals, we all know what independence is. Independence is a state of mind. It can't be defined into any specific book, or we can't really talk about what is really independent. But we have to put words to independence, and therefore the study group all the wise members of the study group put up certain points about what we understood is what independence is all about. And the points that really came up is that the professional shall be independent and neutral. The neutrality aspect of it should come. He should not get biased by any by people telling him hundreds of things, because there will be hundreds of people when we do forensic assignments. I'm sure all of us are aware, where people will come and give us frivolous points, unfrivolous points. They'll give specific points. They'll come and talk to us all over the place, and they'll keep telling us that the suspect is a crook, he's a dubious guy, whatever. And therefore, we have to be independent and neutral. We have to give them a year. But when we come to our judgment, we need to be independent, both in mind, conduct, and appearance. All three in whichever order, but equal order of importance. We have to have an independent mind. We have to have an independent conduct of the way we conduct ourselves. And we also not only need to be independent, but we also must appear to be independent. It's like justice. Justice must not only be given, but it must be seeming to have been given also. Even the person who gets the justice should really feel that, yes, I really got the justice. So that is a very important point. He must be free from any undue influence. That means he should not, have a fear of favor, as what we call in English. He should not be. He should be beyond all these things. Of course, I know that these are very easy things to talk on a seminar on a Monday evening to a bunch of excited people. But these are the basic things that are really required. And as I said, this is principle based. So these are the principles. And a good professional will get distinguished when he maintains all these principles, difficult as it is. Because it is difficult, I think we all of us are there, right? If it is a simple task, then there would be 6 million people doing this. But why is there only a few set of people doing this? Because that expertise has come, because that experience has come, because he or she has been able to imbibe all these qualities into the workspace and into his or her own character. So and so there must be he or she must be, the professional must be free from any undue influence which forces deviation from the truth. And there's one more principle on the truth, but or influences, or anything which influences the outcome. For the independence, the professional needs to resist any pressure or interference in establishing the scope of the engagement. That is the most important thing. While and one standard talks about the terms of engagement, and that time we have to be very, very, very careful and very sure about what is going to be the scope of our assignment, and the manner in which the work is conducted or reported. So we have to be completely, fiercely independent is a very good word which I've heard in the past, that we must be fiercely independent about this. And the professional engaged as an external service provider shall ensure that the appointment is made with due authority. Many times there is another standard on work of an expert, because we might require specific skills at the time of an engagement, and we may not have those skills. And at that time, we may have to appoint an expert. So there's a standard on that as well. So not only we, but even the person appointed needs to be having this independence. The next principle is on the integrity and objectivity. So here the professional shall be honest, truthful, and a person of high integrity. He must act and behave in a very highly ethical manner and must be completely fair in all his dealings. He shall avoid all, when I say he, my lady friends in the audience, I meant the professional shall be free of any conflicts of interest, and he shall not seek or derive any undue advantages from the assignment. And the work must be done in a very highly objective manner. Discovery of evidence, there is another standard on discovery of evidence, and especially discovery of evidence in a digital way, because that's the way forward, and evaluation of all facts. And he should not allow any prejudice or bias in arriving at his or her conclusion. And the professional needs to plan and execute the work in an unbiased manner and accept all responsibilities of the outcome. He must have the quest for truth, and the objectives must be properly outlined. Then the next one is on the due professional care. The due professional care, I think we are all aware of that as professionals, as chartered accountants, we have to bring to bear in all our work, not only in our work, in our conduct as a human being, we have to bring due professional care and diligence, and specifically in our professional work, all the professional care and diligence in our work. And we just to elaborate due diligence, due professional care, that he has taken reasonable care to ensure that these things have done. And Anil Bandari today also spoke about that we must follow the process. The process was followed, and therefore that will help us. We must have adequate focus and attention, uh, are given to all matters of importance, along with diligence in time management. Time management becomes a very critical thing. We can't drag assignments forever and keep going at it. So let's come down now. There are a couple of more points on this. I think the group we can, and the last important point, the last line is that we must not exceed the brief without due approvals. Even if there is something else that comes, and again I will draw parallel to a construction contract, when there is something out of the scope of work, in our exuberance, in our strive for excellence, we simply start doing the work without actually telling the client. But then those deviations become a problem when we actually bill, and sometimes the client may say, oh, why the hell did you get into that, that was not part of the scope, and so on and so forth. Confidentiality, I think this needs no elaboration, but we must maintain the utmost confidentiality. We must protect the privacy rights of all the suspects, so-called suspects. The privacy rights, we cannot intimidate them. We cannot afford to infringe anything, because infringe the rights of the suspect, because the case will then turn around on us. And this will apply to all the members of the team, including the external work of an expert. And he shall keep, the professional shall keep all the information that he got uh, absolutely confidential, and will not disclose it to anybody unless there is a competent authority or a court or anybody competent authority directs us to kind of share this for the confidential information. Otherwise, it should not be shared at all. And the skills and competencies, whenever an engagement is taken, in our uh, will to want to take assignments, we have to be very careful that we take such assignments where we have the requisite skill, the competence to do this, to do the assignment, the necessary qualifications for actually doing it. And the professional should have sound knowledge, practical experience, and professional expertise in the forensic space to carry out the assignment. So there is a learning curve that we must go through before we accept and conduct these assignments. And it's not only for the partner of the firm, or for the head of the department, or for the managers in the department, but for everybody, every team member who is engaged in the assignment. These particular sound knowledge, practical experience, and professional uh, role play has to be there. And the CPE is also going to be a part of this engagement requirement. While drafting this, there was a lot of points on whether we should define a specific number of hours, but finally we have kept it open that these things also will be important. Soft skills is going to be a very important aspect of the skills that are really required for us to do. And this applies to all the team members and including the experts that we will be talking about. Contextualization of the situation. Now, we must be mindful that each forensic assignment is a completely different assignment from any other engagement. It is very unique, these forensic assignments, and therefore we must be mindful of the context of the situation. We must keep the situation in mind and the environment in mind, when we go. So when we enter a religious place, we have to be mindful of the environment that is there. We must maintain the silence. We must follow the rules that are there, and so on and so forth. So we must obviously, so therefore each assignment is unique. We must understand the nature of the business, the situation, the complexity, the environment, the circumstances, the time, the manner in which all of this comes together. We must also understand what are the kind of people that we must really get involved in this, and we must obviously look at the probability of occurrence of any unlawful acts. The red flags, the fraud indicators is something that we must keep in mind. The next one, that is 3.7, is something about the primacy of truth. That is, all these assignments is ultimately what? In a forensic assignment, the ultimate thing is that we must find the truth. Many times in the philosophically, when I have lectures about Bhagavad Gita, they always say the primal truth is who am I, what am I, why am I here, and all those kind of things. I'm not talking philosophy here, but the basic principle of the forensic assignment is to find out the truth. So all that we do is ultimately to find out what the truth is. And it is to unearth the reality on every allegation or dispute which really comes out. And this must be completely based on facts, figures, and any other reliable evidential matters that we have got. So that's the primacy of truth. And we must, actually, what actually happened, what actually occurred, and we must be cautious that we are not misled in other ways, because there's a lot of scope. It's a very flamboyant kind of assignment, and we must respect the rights and obligation. That's the point 8th principle which is there, that we must keep in mind, we must be mindful of the rights of the other, of the person who's defending it, and we must have the right of examination to give it. We must give the person the right to defend his innocence, his or her innocence. The principles of natural justice, right to be heard, opportunity to present their versions of the truth. Both sides of the argument should be heard. In any judgment, in any judge, you can't hear one version of the for resolving any issue. If my child comes and says that, Mahesh beat me today, I can't believe my child. I have to hear his version. And ultimately, it may come out that my child himself has kind of done something which was. So both the sides have to be heard. And we must separate facts from opinions. This is, I think, a very important thing, that we must, an opinion is an opinion, a fact is a fact, and we must not mix the two. That is a very important, and we must completely remove our element of bias from our mind. Easy things to say, very important things to know, but our experience and our will to do the right thing, these things, and sometimes even philosophy has helped us to make sure that we follow these kind of principles. And remember, this is a fact-finding exercise. So this is a fact-finding exercise. Therefore, we should lose that our personal judgment and biases have no place. That, non-veg is bad for as a eating. We must have a Jain diet. These are all personal judgments and personal. So all these biases must be taken out, and personal perspective should be simply separated from professional judgment. And the last principle is on quality and continuous improvement. Anything we do, we can do better. That's a philosophy of life, that anything we do, we can do better. So the quality of work will definitely, it will depend on the credibility of our outcome and the reliability of our findings. So we must ensure that we have a reliable assessment mechanism in place, and the CA Institute is already known for the peer reviews that we have. And, so this kind of things have to be brought about. So the last point of it is an effective date, which will be notified. So this is the entire, about 1/4 of the 112-page document, and we will be covering the second quarter, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter of the document in the days to come. And I am sure, I hope to see more and more of you. I mean, please to tell your friends to come about. And this is like a typical serial, Hindi serial. You don't have to attend the first part of the serial to know what is in the second part. You'll be able to catch up. So don't worry. You can tell your friends and associates to. You make sure that you guys are there tomorrow onwards, and also tell your friends to join. So what if they miss the first part? I'm sure DIGGIs and the technology is providing scope for uploading this on YouTube or whatever. But even if they don't get the time to spend 2 hours to looking at the YouTube and hearing an old man speak for so long, don't worry about it. Please join for the session.
There are questions, Satish.
Yeah, yes, please. Yes, please. I am willing to go on, so I have no problem.
First question is, traditionally, fraud examination has not been a professional practice of CAs in India. So globally, A lot of news is seen that Big Four has said they are not doing fraud examination. So are we going to see a beginning?
Yes, there is tremendous scope, as Neil Bhandari said. This is a new practice which is coming in. So there's going to be something niche which you can create, and to the extent that we create this niche, as Anil was talking about data analytics and the business and 10 billion and 20 billion and 30 billion and all the billions of dollars that he spoke about. So this is a niche that is really going to be there, and this is an area for professional practice of the future, and therefore I always say. And I always felt that a 58-year-old man should, whether that's the right thing to do or not. I have been debating, I have been discussing with Dipji. We had a long conversation this morning. By the way, I'm on leave today because of some other reason. For the entire week, I'm on leave for some good reason. I'm on leave. So I was spending the day today and I spoke to Dipji as well. And so we are doing something to make sure that it's not a 58-year-old man and you'll wonder why this old man is talking to us. We are doing something to make sure that the youngsters are also got into it, and somebody from the team, I'm planning to bring him also along, who was part of the team, and I was there with him right through. So we get a different perspective. So this is the thing for the future. Just as many years back, when I was my first job, when I moved from Hindustan Petroleum to L&T, that time, Windows 95 was something which was like a new technology for me. It was like a technology. I just understand. Excel and Word was something like technology. Today, we don't count Excel and Word as technology. We just say that this is part of my day-to-day work. So this is going to be the plan of the future. And to the extent we imbibe this faster, the better.
Are auditors going to be held accountable, and how?
Yes, auditors are going to be accountable. I'm really, and I can go on record on this. Many times when frauds have come out, we always say in our internal audit and profession that, every time when something goes wrong, they say, where were the auditors? But as we move along, we have seen that there has been some cases really on the auditors. And today, this morning, as late as this morning, I read a report by one of the by GT on DHFL and said that there was a 6,000 crore fraud which was continuing to sit. So I don't think that we'll escape all these things for too long, and we are going to be held accountable. At that time, what is going to help us is the fact that it was missed out is quite evident. I mean, it's coming out because that thing has been found out. But what will save us is that whether we followed all the processes, if we are able to establish to the authorities that we have followed our processes, then that particular aspect is going to help us. So we had a quality process in check. We did everything that we could do, and therefore I brought all professional skill and bear on this and due diligence on my assignment. But still, it happened. So that's how I think we'll be able to stay away. But in the times to come, I'm sorry to say, and I don't know whether I'm sorry or happy, but we'll be part of the problem. We can't be just part of the solution all the time.
What about the external pressure on forensic audit and legal complication on forensic report for court procedure?
Yes, absolutely. I think the standards have been very clearly defined only for this particular aspect, that these reports are going to be treated as an evidence. And therefore, at that time, we are not going to be in a position to say, see, in my report, in that 30-second page, the 2 words I wrote. No, if you had a strong point, please put it down in the report, because in a forensic report, this is going to be critical. You will lose the opportunity. I have already said this in my speech, that when you shoot a bullet, the bullet is gone. You cannot thereafter control the speed of the bullet. You cannot control the direction of the bullet. You cannot control the target to whom you actually targeted. You cannot say, no, I aimed at this person, but it hit somebody else. So what can I do here? It's a tragedy of life. And because there was a wind speed which went that way, the bullet went and hit somebody else. Even in cricket, you use the wind for actually getting wickets. You know that the wind is blowing from east to west, and accordingly the bowler adapts. Accordingly, the captain gives the bowler the right side to bowl at. The bowler uses the right side of the ball to bowl. So there are enough parallels in life that teaches us that we better make sure that the report is going to stand the test of time. And these things must not be done in a hurry, but we must also keep time management in our aspect. So things are going to become difficult, but I'm sure that as a profession, we are going to get more respect for it. We are going to get compensated much, much more for doing this kind of work, and we'll grow professionally. That's the way I look at it.
The last question is, can you elaborate on highly ethical behavior? Ethical, can you elaborate on highly ethical manner?
Yeah. I mean, suffice to say, I mean, ethical behavior, it's something that you live your own principles on, and ethics and basically ethical behavior is something that you do when nobody is looking at you. It is something that you do when nobody is looking at you. A right is a right, even if nobody is doing it. A wrong is a wrong, even if everybody is doing it. So if everybody is breaking a signal and I break a signal, it doesn't mean I did the right thing. I can give an explanation that everybody has broken the signal, so what wrong? But you have done that wrong. Whether everybody done it or not, it doesn't matter. And a right is right, even if nobody is doing it. If you go and stop at the signal, of course, make sure that the guy behind you doesn't come and crash into you. But if you stop at a signal when you're driving, even if everybody zips past you, doesn't make what you're doing wrong, right? It's the right thing to do. So these things mean different things to different people. It's also the environment. It's also the environment. The lotus flower, and I'm not a BJP supporter or anything like that, but I'm saying the BJP, not the BJP, the lotus flower doesn't say that I'm in such a lousy environment. So let me also be what the lotus flower just blooms. TN Session never said that the election office is a bloody crap office, and nobody should get me wrong on this and have some social media comments on what I said. But he didn't say that, oh, what can I do? The office is like this only. He stood up and said that. So we can't blame the environment. Culture is something that we do. What is culture? I've said this earlier as well, and I think this question has touched me on the soft side, which I can keep talking about. So there is enough literature that we need to understand, we need to read. You need to read, go back to the scriptures, the Bible, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita. There are so many things which will tell us what is right and what is wrong. And therefore, I think we have to each one of us have to behave in a right. Suppose I'm talking about cleanliness. How can a place be clean? It's not the BMC that has to come and clean the place up, right? If each one of us keeps the place clean, I think it automatically the place becomes clean. So it is a difficult topic, but with some kind of experience, some kind of moving ahead, we all will can get into it. But there is no specific right or wrong, and we have to move ahead. And if somebody asks a question that you see somebody smoking 60 cigarettes a day and he doesn't get any of the diseases, and somebody who doesn't smoke at all attracts a particular disease, whom can he question? He cannot file a case against any medical profession or anything. It's just the circumstances or the environment or whatever, some total of many things which have caused that thing to happen to him or her. And you only can focus attention on not why it happened, but what is it that I need to make sure that I get out from that. So there's no right answer for this, but I think collectively we all need to make sure that this happens.
I think thank you very much, Satish. I think it was a wonderful first episode of this, forensic accounting, understanding forensic accounting and investigation standards, and in a very Satish Shenoy-like way, you have brought it out very clearly, distinctly. Let's have you and all the participants again tomorrow, same time, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time, and let's go through the 100 series, the standards. Let's begin with the standards now. After the framework, the preface, framework, and basic principles, we go on to now the 100 series standards, which are the key concepts. So tomorrow we'll have Satish and Anand Jangid to enlighten us about the 100 series standards. With that, thank you very much to all the participants and to Satish. Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, and see you all tomorrow on YouTube and on Zoom. Thank you.